Revealed, 7 spine-chilling midnight tales of the cursed and sinister unexplained horrors await. The October wind howled like a banshee outside Jenna's small suburban home, her heart racing with every gust as she tightened her grip on the spatula. It was just another night at the diner, but tonight felt different. As she served a peculiar group of customers draped in outdated costumes, their laughter chilled her to the bone. They spoke in riddles and whispered secrets, their eyes glinting in a way that unsettled her. "Beware the shadows," one muttered, as if she wasn't meant to hear. The air was thick with an unspeakable terror that hung over the diner like a storm cloud ready to burst. Outside, the laughter of children crafting costumes for Halloween faded away, replaced by a silence that prickled her skin. When she finally closed the diner, the familiar streets of her community twisted into something unrecognizable. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, and her heart thumped loudly against her ribs. Muffled whispers echoed through the stormy night, teasing her senses, pulling her into a world where safety felt like a distant dream. The neighborhood dogs, once a cacophony of comforting barks, were suddenly silent. Disappearing one by one like they had been devoured by the creeping darkness. Jenna shivered as she walked home, the crunch of leaves underfoot oddly loud in the stillness. "It's just exhaustion," she muttered to herself, pushing the dread aside. Inside, her children huddled by the window, their youthful faces pale and anxious. "Mommy, there are people outside, they keep laughing," her 8-year-old whispered, his voice shaky. Panic twisted in Jenna's gut. She brushed off their fears, saying it was just the wind, but doubt gnawed at her as she replayed their words in her head. It was Halloween, a time for frightful fun, yet the air felt charged with something far more sinister. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With her heart pounding, Jenna set out again. She kept her eyes peeled, searching for any sign of danger. The neighborhood had always been safe. People shared baked goods and Halloween candy, but as she passed the garden of the friendly older woman everyone adored, Jenna noticed strange symbols carved into the wood of her fence. A shiver ran up her spine. The woman greeted her with a smile, but her eyes held something else, something dark that made Jenna's skin crawl. Suddenly, a chill raced through her as she caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of her eye. Her mind screamed at her to run. A gut-wrenching laughter echoed through the air, as if the very shadows were mocking her fear. Her breath caught, and she knew something was wrong. She realized the safety of her children now hung in a precarious balance. The darkness was alive. She was no longer just a mother, she was a predator's next meal, surrounded by neighbors who wore friendly faces but hid malevolent intentions. The clock struck midnight, the giggles of the unseen grew louder. Jenna's heart raced in terror, an insatiable urge to protect her family surged within her. What would she uncover next behind the masks of her seemingly harmless neighbors? Jenna burst into the house, slamming the door behind her as the final echoes of that eerie laughter faded into the night. The sound still buzzed in her ears, drowning out the steady thrum of her heart. She turned to her children, their wide eyes reflecting her fear back at her. "Stay close," she whispered, gripping their small hands tightly, as if their innocence could shield them from what lurked outside. The wind howled again, rattling the windows. She cursed under her breath and rushed to draw the curtains. Outside, shadows danced in the moonlight, shifting with a life of their own, as if they were trying to slip inside. Jenna pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her breath fogging up the surface. She swore she saw a figure lurking just at the edge of her yard, an outline she couldn't quite decipher. "Mommy, can we turn on the TV? It'll help." Her son begged, the tremor in his voice unmistakable. "Not now, sweetie," she said, urgency lacing her words. The TV would drown out the world, but it couldn't protect them from what was out there. She frantically checked the locks, each click a certainty as missing as her own calm. Every creak of the old house unnerved her, each sound seemed amplified in the thick silence. The clock ticked on the wall. Time was slipping away, yet she felt as if it had stopped. Minutes crawled into eternity. It didn't make sense. Halloween was supposed to be fun. Costumes, laughter, and sweet treats, but instead, a sickening dread filled the air. "Mom, look!" Her daughter gasped, pointing towards the window. Jenna followed her gaze. Her heart plummeted. Outside, the shadows had gathered closer. The twisted forms of her neighbors' faces masked and eyes glimmering stood just beyond the glow of the streetlight, their laughter turning into a low hum, a chant that echoed across the yard. "Stay back!" Jenna shouted, a fierce protectiveness surging through her. She grabbed her phone, fingers trembling, and dialed the police. Each ring felt like a lifetime of spiraling dread. Finally, the line picked up, but the words that tumbled out of her mouth felt choked, stuck in her throat. "There are people outside, they're not normal, I'm scared, stay inside, Ma am." "Help is on the way," the calm voice replied, but Jenna felt answered only by her shrill terror that echoed back in her mind. Help could be too late, the chanting grew louder. They were calling to her now, beckoning. She could feel the pull in her chest, the desire to answer their haunting song tugging at her senses. It made her skin crawl. She took a step back, the phone nearly slipping from her fingers. "Cover your ears!" she screamed, desperate to shield her children from those sinister sounds. As they pressed their palms to their ears, Jenna felt an odd warmth wash over her, as if something supernatural seeped into the house. A sickly sweet scent filled the air, mingling with the stale oven warmth from dinner. It was intoxicating, a siren's call she yearned to give into. "Mommy, it hurts!" Her daughter cried, panic swirling in her wide eyes, the laughter morphed into whispers. Join us, the words curled around her like smoke, seeping into her mind. Jenna stumbled back, fighting against the compulsion. She needed to protect her children, they were her anchor against the storm outside. She couldn't let them fall into the shadows. But how could she stop them? The figure outside lifted its head. She felt its gaze piercing through the darkened glass, and her breath hitched in her throat. The darkness was no longer just outside. It was inside, too, clawing at her sanity. As the door rattled, threatening to splinter against the weight of those malevolent forces, Jenna understood with chilling clarity this was no ordinary Halloween night. They had come for her family. They had come for her. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. The laughter erupted into manic glee, swallowed by the wild wind outside. What would she do when the door burst open, when those masked figures poured in? Would she fight, or would she succumb? Jenna knew that the biggest horror of all was just beginning. Jenna's heart raced as the darkness surged around her, swallowing the room in thick, oppressive air. Each whisper echoed in her mind, more insistent now, laced with an urgency that felt unnatural. The clamoring outside surged, eager hands clawing at the door. "Mommy, please," her son whined, tears brimming in his innocent eyes. They shifted, pressed against her, their small bodies trembling like leaves in a storm. She felt their fear like a second skin, wrapping around her like a vice. Jenna could barely process the chaos, a tempest of panic swirling inside her. The door shuddered again. She whipped around, searching for anything that could fend off the encroaching horror. A glint caught her eye from the kitchen counter, the knife she had used for dinner. It felt absurdly inadequate in the face of the malevolence waiting just outside. Moving towards it, every step felt like wading through molasses. The shadows outside flickered and danced under the sporadic moonlight, wraith-like figures shuddering as they leaned against the walls of her home. "Mommy!" Her daughter cried again, louder this time, desperation spilling over. "Shoo, just stay quiet." Jenna whispered fiercely, gripping the knife's handle until her knuckles turned white. She glanced back at the door. The rattling intensified. With every violent shake, she imagined the hinges splintering, the barrier between safety and chaos crumbling into dust. The wind howled, shrieking through the cracks, mocking her with its teasing fury. The whispers outside morphed, fuller now, a melody of voices intertwining. Let us in, let us in. It was a chant, rhythmic and unsettling, threading its way into her mental fortitude, tugging at her resolve. Jenna clutched her children tighter, forcing them to look into her eyes. Look at me. We're going to stay together, okay? She swallowed hard, praying her voice remained steady, battling her own rising fear. They nodded, though their faces were pale, shocked, helpless. A sudden crash jolted her. The sound burst through the night, like thunder, and the door buckled. A sliver of darkness oozed into the room. Jenna's breath caught in her throat, the limb of a shadow slithered through. Mom! Her son shouted, panic ricocheting off the walls. Get back! She yelled, pushing her kids behind her. The knife felt heavy in her palm, a cold comfort against the impending chaos. The chanting swelled, now an insatiable roar, leading unnaturally into her thoughts. Each syllable felt like hands weaving into the fabric of her sanity. Join us, join us. With a primal scream, she lunged toward the door, knife raised. Stay back! She shouted, her voice raw and trembling with fear and fury. Shadows shifted, retreating slightly as if her anger momentarily pushed them away, then, in a flash of movement, they surged forward. The door cracked, splintering under the weight of competing forces. Jenna stumbled backward, her children scrambling back, eyes wide with terror. The realization hit her like a punch. The shadows were advancing, hunger gleaming in their unseen eyes. Mom! What do we do? Her daughter whimpered, clasping her brother tightly, holding the knife aloft. Jenna felt the very air grow thick with dread. She could almost feel a heartbeat beneath the floorboards, an ancient rhythm that aligned with the chaos beyond the door. Just as she braced for the inevitable, the chanting rose to a deafening crescendo and, in that moment, everything fell silent. The lights flickered back on, bathing the room in an unholy glow. The door remained intact, but the shadows outside recoiled as if the light burned them. Were they retreating? Or merely regrouping? A silence heavy with tension held her like a vice, making her heart pound in her chest. Would they come again? Should she fight, or should she flee? She glanced around desperately for a way out while her senses screamed at her to prepare for what's next. Then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed movement in the darkness beyond the yard. A figure stepped forward, someone she recognized, someone familiar, but in the heartbeat of light, it transformed. The figure stretched, contorting into something grotesque. Not now, not ever, it hissed, the whisper curling around her like smoke, and suddenly, Jenna was certain of one thing: this was only the prelude to a terror that would consume everything she loved. What had she unleashed? Jenna blinked, her heart slamming against her ribs as the familiar face twisted into a grotesque mockery of its former self. It was her neighbor, Mr. Hargrove, the man who always waved from his porch, and now his skin shimmered with shadows, shifting as if alive. His features elongated, eyes now just dark pits that seemed to suck in the light around him. Look what you've brought! He rasped, extending his arms as if to embrace the darkness. We've been waiting. A chill shot down Jenna's spine. Mommy, what is that? Her son asked, eyes wide, tears glistening on his cheeks. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Jenna felt her throat tighten. I don't know, she managed, her voice just above a whisper. Behind Mr. Hargrove, the shadows wove and spun, taking shape into more indistinct forms, eyes glowing like embers. The light dimmed again, flickering menacingly. Jenna's grip on the knife felt less assured. Panic clawed at her mind, urging her to run, to flee into the unknown. But behind her, the shadows surged, filling every escape route, blocking her view of the windows and doors, trapping them all with whispers that tugged at her sanity. Join us, Jenna joined the darkness. The shadows hummed, a swelling tide that seeped deeper into her thoughts. It was seductive, a promise of peace, of release from fear. But the glimmer of her children, their innocent dread, snapped her back. "No! Get back!" she shouted, her voice strong despite the tremors within. The darkness recoiled, and for a split second, she thought she saw fear flicker in those abyssal eyes. "Run!" she yelled to her kids, but the words felt hollow and the reality of their situation crashed down on her like an avalanche. They were surrounded. The shadows were solid, tangible now, coiling like serpents ready to strike. "Mommy!" her daughter cried, her small voice edged with terror. Jenna stepped back, nearly stumbling into the kitchen table. "Think," she told herself. She scanned the room, desperate for something, anything, that could help her fight. "Take the knife." Her instincts screamed. She needed to protect them. The chanting resumed, louder this time, escalating into a wild cacophony that echoed in her mind. Each syllable of the chilling invitation twisted her thoughts, causing her to waver on the brink of despair. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, as if drawing strength from their chaos. Mr. Hargrove stepped forward again, his form more defined now. "Why fight this, Jenna? We can offer you so much more than this miserable existence. Shut up!" she screamed, lunging forward, knife aimed straight at him. The blade danced in the flickering light. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Jenna saw the moment of uncertainty, and it fueled her resolve. "Mom!" her son cried, pulling her back. "Please. Please don't. I'm scared." His plea crashed against her heart like a wave. Then she realized, it wasn't just about them anymore. It was a choice, a battle between the fading hope of her family and the dulcet call of darkness wrapping them in its embrace. "Stay close!" she shouted, pivoting to protect her children, her body forming a shield. With a roar building in her throat, Jenna surged forward once more, feeling adrenaline spike through her veins as she faced the twisted figure before her. "Get away from my family!" And just like that, the air shifted, the chant ceased abruptly, replaced by a bone-deep silence that felt like the dagger of death drawing nearer. Then the figure before her distorted, radiating an ominous energy that crackled in the stillness. "Your will is weak, Jenna," it hissed, a smirk spreading across its warped features. "You cannot fight what you've stirred." She watched, horrified, as behind the figure, shadows began swirling, not just in the room but everywhere around them, an endless tide closing in. Suddenly, an ear-splitting silver bell rang through the air. The ground trembled beneath her, and the figure faltered, momentarily distracted. "What now?" The shadows seemed to pause, recoiling as if caught off guard. Jenna seized the moment, the knife pulsing in her hand. She didn't know if they could escape or if they were damned to this nightmare. But she made a choice. Without hesitating, she moved toward the doorway leading to the hall, her heart racing. The figure and shadows had stopped for just a second, it was instinct now. "Mommy, wait!" her daughter shouted, reaching for her. But Jenna had no intention of stopping now. She felt the weight of fate resting on her shoulders, a choice to embrace her fight or succumb to the shadows, and the last vestiges of safety were falling away. Then, before she could cross the threshold, the whispers returned, clamoring, echoing louder than before. "You'll pay, Jenna will take what's yours." And in that electric moment, everything fell into chaos again. What horrific fate awaited her on the other side of the door? Jenna barely breathed as she edged toward the door, the air thick with dread. Her heart hammered a relentless rhythm, urging her to run. The shadows flickered like hungry flames behind Mr. Hargrove, their whispers growing more insistent, drowning out reason. "Mommy!" Her son's eyes were wide, searching hers for reassurance, but all she saw was terror reflected back. Every instinct screamed at her to protect her children, to shield them from the nightmare unfurling before them. "Hold on to me!" Jenna shouted, gripping her son's arm tightly. She made a quick motion, pulling her daughter closer as she positioned herself in the doorway, every muscle tense, ready to spring. "Open the door," a voice hissed, slithering through the silence like ice. "Let us in, Jenna. It's time you embraced the truth." No. She recoiled against the wall, instinctively pointing the knife toward the shifting shadows. It was a feeble gesture, she knew it, but she'd die fighting rather than submit. The shadows trembled, and Mr. Hargrove's form smiled, a rictus grin devoid of warmth. You truly believe this will save you? He taunted, stepping closer, the darkness swirling with him. You can't escape what's inside you. We're all connected now. Jenna felt a sickening twist in her stomach. They were right. Ever since they moved in, whispers had danced on the edge of her thoughts, shadowed dreams clawing at her sleep. But she'd fooled herself into thinking they were just her imagination. Her breath quickened. There was no more denying it, the darkness was a part of her. Stay back. She shouted, spinning on her heels. The door was her only hope. If she could reach the hallway, maybe she could find an exit. Heart racing, she sprinted forward, dodging the wavering forms crowding her vision. Mommy! Cried her daughter, feet rooted in place. Come on, baby, come with me. Jenna coaxed, but her daughter hesitated, eyes glued to Mr. Hargrove, entranced by terror. Suddenly, she felt a sharp tug on her arm. It was her son, pulling her back. We can't leave her, Mommy. His voice cracked with despair. Don't you understand? Jenna shouted, panic spilling over. It's a trap. They'll take you. The shadows surged, pulsing with energy, seeming to stretch to snatch her children from her grasp. Then, without warning, the air became oppressively heavy. She felt it, a coldness wrapping around her, squeezing tight like a vice. The shadows weren't merely shadows anymore, they were demons, feeding off the fear in the room, looming closer as the sinister invitation grew louder. Come, children, come to us. You'll be safe, they crooned, their voices weaving into the air like silk threads, binding her kids with promises of warmth and acceptance. With a mighty effort, Jenna thrust her knife forward. Leave them alone. She bellowed, the sound shattering the stillness. The blade pierced through the air, colliding with an unseen wall of darkness. A scream erupted from the shadows, an agonizing wail that resonated through the house. In that moment, a crack opened in the fabric of reality, light breaking through the gaps. The shadows hesitated, quaking in reaction to the sudden surge of brightness. Run! Jenna shouted, spurring her children into motion, grabbing both their hands and lunging forward into the hall. The flicker of light tasted like salvation on her tongue, but as her feet hit the ground, the whispers morphed into an anguished howl. Flee if you must, but we will be waiting, always waiting. The front door loomed ahead, but Jenna could already feel the darkness clawing at her ankles, trying to drag her back into the void. With every stride, she felt the weight of the whispers pressing down harder. Faster! Don't look back! She commanded, the knife held tightly in one hand, the terror of what lay behind her fueling her sprint. They burst through the doorway, but the world beyond was not what she expected. The sky was a swirling mass of gray, darkness blotting out the stars, and the ground trembled beneath their feet as the shadows roiled like a troubled sea, waiting to reclaim them. Where are we? Her daughter asked in bewilderment, breathless and pale. Jenna turned, her heart sinking. The road ahead was lined with twisted trees, their limbs reaching out like skeletal fingers. It felt unreal, as though they had stepped into a nightmare beyond the nightmare. What have I done? She gasped, uncertainty flooding her as she looked back toward their home. The shadows were no longer behind the door, they were here with them, congealing, whispering promises in an unending dark. The urgency of the moment surged, she couldn't let them fall apart now. They needed to go. But a distant, horrifying realization struck her. What if the darkness followed? What if they were now forever bound to it, wherever they fled? Mommy! Her son's voice snapped her back. What is going to happen? Jenna swallowed hard. She could feel the shadows inching toward them, coiling like smoke, dark tendrils reaching for their legs. They were cornered, and the hunt was on. What would they do now? Would they outrun the darkness or become part of its eternal embrace? Desperation rose within her like bile, then, beyond the trees, she glimpsed a dim light flickering. Hope ignited. "Follow me," she yelled, taking a deep breath as they moved toward the glimmer, the shadows chasing them with every hurried step, but as they neared, she noticed something chilling. The light flickered uneasily, almost as if it were alive, a lurid beacon summoning them deeper into the unknown. What awaited them at the end of this path? Jenna pushed ahead, her pulse thrumming in her ears, drowning out everything but the thudding of her heart. The flickering light glimmered through the twisted trees, a pulse of hope amid the encroaching dread. Yet something gnawed at her thoughts. The way the light danced, it felt wrong, alive, perhaps even predatory. "Mommy?" Her daughter's voice trembled, breaking through the veil of panic cloaking Jenna's mind. "What if it's a trap? It can't be worse than what we just left," Jenna urged, her mind racing. The dark forms were closing in, snapping at their heels, palpable fear rolling off them in waves. "We have to keep moving." Her son tugged at her sleeve, his grip fragile and uncertain. "But what if it's not safe? What if we end up like him?" He pointed back, past the dark trees, to the house they had just escaped. Mr. Hargrove's gnarled smile flashed in her mind, a grotesque reminder of the fate she feared. No, we won tea," Jenna snapped, fighting to steady her voice. "We can't think like that. Just trust me." But deep inside, she was spiraling. How could she protect them if she herself was terrified? As they approached the light, Jenna stopped suddenly. It pulsated now, a heartbeat in the night, louder than the whispers that crawled under her skin. The shadows writhed, seeming to grow more restless the closer they came. Despair clawed at her throat, a very real fear of what hovered just beyond the trees. Before she could move, a voice broke through the air like glass shattering. Jenna, it trailed off, echoing through the dark, wrapping around them. "You were never meant to leave. We want you, all of you." The shadows lunged, stretching like dark claws, their forms taking shape. Faces twisted in eternal anguish formed from the darkness, reaching toward them as if beckoning. Jenna screamed, a raw, primal sound that cut through the night, and she grabbed her children, tightly clutching them against her. "Run!" she cried again, urgency spilling from her lips. They darted forward, pushing through the underbrush, the beacon growing brighter with every agonizing step. But as they drew near, Jenna's resolve faltered. What if it gives them what they want? Her daughter implored, wide eyes shimmering with fear. What if it takes us back? Just then, a shriek tore through the air, and Jenna knew the shadows were in pursuit. Instinctively, she pulled her children closer, feeling the warmth of their bodies grounding her amidst the dread. Could it come to them? Could it promise them the safety it was forever denying her? Then they broke through the trees and came upon the light. It wasn't just a glow, it was a swirling mass of colors, and at its center, a figure stood. Tall and imposing, the silhouette danced in the luminescence. "Welcome," it spoke, voice smooth as honey but as cold as ice. Jenna's skin prickled, every instinct telling her to step back. "Get away from us!" she shouted, brandishing the knife, though it felt like a child's toy in the face of this unsettling presence. The figure grinned, eyes glinting mischievously. "You know why you're here, don't you? To face your truth, to let go of fear." And in that moment, Jenna felt something shift within her, a whisper twisting, urging her to listen. Her heart thudded violently, questions spiraling through her mind. Did the darkness offer freedom? Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, and she realized what the light truly was. It had trapped so many before her, feeding off their fear and despair. The thought gripped her, how many souls were lost on that path, drawn in by promises. "Mommy!" her son cried, pulling her back to the moment. The shadows were behind them still, unforgiving. "Let us go," she urged, pulling her children back, but the light behind them remained a blinding temptation. Would they dare to turn? The shadows howled, threatening to consume them whole, but as Jenna looked into her children's frightened eyes, she knew one truth: facing the darkness was the only chance they had. Would she make that choice? What waited for them at the edge of the light? Would she risk it all again, or was the darkness bound to win? A scream echoed as the shadows lunged forward once more, embracing the night. Choose now. It thundered, leaving Jenna with one impossible decision, a fork in the road drawn stark against the fear that lingered. But the question remained: what was the truth they needed to embrace? Would they plunge into the light or drown in the waiting dark? Jenna's breath caught in her throat as the shadows closed in, their whispers clawing at the edges of her sanity. Her children clung to her, their tiny hands trembling like leaves in a storm. She could see the fear gnawing at them, eyes wide with unshed tears. Only a few steps separated them from the swirling light, but those steps felt like a lifetime. "Mommy, please." Her daughter whimpered, each syllable a jagged dagger in Jenna's heart. "We can't go in there. Hold on." She snapped, an edge of desperation creeping into her voice. The shadows were relentless, a tidal wave of anguish and darkness pushing at their backs, threatening to envelope them. She felt their cold breath on her neck, every heartbeat echoing louder, drowning out reason. "What if the light is a lie?" her son asked, his voice trembling. "What if the shadows are trying to trick us?" As her heart raced, Jenna thought of Mr. Hargrove, the way he had laughed, the glint of madness in his eyes. Had he, too, been lured by the promise of salvation? The mere thought sent a shiver racing down her spine. She couldn't let them share his fate. What if it was true? What if the light only beckoned them to their doom? "Mommy, please," her daughter cried again, and Jenna felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. Her children were counting on her, and she was terrified of leading them into the very trap she feared. "Trust me," she shouted, voice cutting through the panic. The shadows screamed. It was a cacophony of anger and desperation, a sound that could turn the bravest of hearts to stone. Holding the knife like a shield, she glanced at the light splintering through the trees, gleaming like a promise yet with a dark edge to it. "Now!" she commanded, bolting forward, pulling her children behind her. But as they approached, the light flickered ominously, intensifying as if feeding off their fear. "Join us," the figure beckoned, voice oozing with seduction, tempting. "You'll never know true freedom until you embrace the darkness." Jenna's vision blurred, her mind teetering on the brink. "No," she shouted, shaking her head violently. The shadows roared back, stirred into a frenzy, threatening to drag all of them back into the haunting abyss. "Mommy, don't listen," her son cried, pulling her hand, his panic clouding the moment. Desperation clawed at her, threatening to drown her spirit. But amidst the terror, a flicker of determination ignited. "Stay close," Jenna yelled, gripping her children tightly. Heart racing, she made a split-second decision and leaped towards the light, plunging forward into the pulsating glow. In that instant, the shadows recoiled as if the light burned them. The warmth enveloped them, a strange comfort wrapping around her like a safety net. But just as Jenna felt hope surge within her, the stillness shattered. "What have you done?" The figure's voice twisted into a snarl, echoing like thunder through the forest. "Now you'll learn how deeply darkness runs." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled as the light shifted violently, hues swirling out of control, and shadows began to crawl back towards them, more vicious than before. "Run, Jenna! Run!" A voice screamed, but she didn't know if it belonged to the figure or someone else. Panic clawed at her mind as the light began to pulse like a dying star, drawing strength from their fear. In the chaos, the edges of reality blurred, and Jenna feared they were slipping back into the shadows, slithering in, coiling around their legs, dragging them down. "Mommy!" her daughter shrieked, her small frame trembling against Jenna's side. The figure loomed larger now, its face shifting into something former: abandonment, rage, hunger. And just as the darkness threatened to swallow them whole, Jenna's resolve crystallized. She needed to understand. They had to face the truth together, but would the truth save them or doom them in that moment of chaos? Together, she yelled, holding her children tighter. But the figure's eyes glinted, and Jenna realized in horror that what lay ahead was far more terrifying than the shadows stalking them. As they braced for the worst, a new question broke through the screaming chaos of the night: would they ever escape the pull of the shadows, or would the light consume them, forever trapped in the endless cycle of despair? The ground quaked violently, sending a jolt through Jenna's body. She could feel the energy shifting around them, the light pulsing like a living creature, as if it were judging them. The shadows, coiling closer, hissed loudly, hungry for their fear, their uncertainty. "Mommy, I'm scared." Her daughter's voice was choked, the mixture of fear and confusion threatening to break her. Jenna's heart ached. She had to be their shield, their protector, but doubt gnawed at her resolve like rats tearing through fragile fabric. "Stay with me," she shouted fiercely, pulling the trembling bodies of her children closer. She could feel their tiny heartbeats thumping in unison with her own. A twisted bond of desperation and love. "Mommy, run." Her son pleaded again as the figure moved closer, its features twisting, distorting nothing human anymore. Its voice was a void, echoing with darkness, promising both freedom and destruction. "You can't outrun your fate." The shadows swirled, thickening around them, and Jenna's grip tightened around her knife. With a surge of reckless bravery, she advanced, pushing her children into the light ahead. But the shifting glow flickered violently, almost as if it were a cruel semblance of hope being snatched away. "Embrace the darkness," the figure hissed, then let out an eerie laughter that echoed with their worst fears, the sound of being abandoned, of loss, of being trapped forever. Jenna stumbled back, throwing her hands over her ears, desperate to drown out the madness. "We can't listen. We have to fight back." Her voice felt small against the overwhelming force of despair. She had to believe. She had to instill courage in her children. "What if we can't go back?" her son whispered, eyes pleading, reflecting the swirling shadows. Fear draped itself thick over their shoulders, dampening hope like a leaden cloak. "Then we face it together," Jenna yelled with a strength she didn't fully feel. They had gone this far, they couldn't let the darkness win. The shadows were closing in, tangling with the light, a dance of terror that threatened to crush them. In that moment, the light erupted with an unsettling vibrance, illuminating the night in a brilliant flare. Jenna shielded her eyes, heart racing as she felt an unseen force pulling them toward the intensity. "Mommy!" her daughter screamed, voice cutting through the glowing chaos. "Help!" Panic surged like fire in Jenna's veins as she lunged forward, struggling to keep her children anchored to her side. The world warped. Time felt elastic, stretching and snapping wildly around them. Figures formed in the shadows, echoes of the tortured. Faces Elena recognized, a neighbor, a friend morphed into grimaces of despair. They reached out, mouths moving in silent screams, eyes hollow. "Help us!" "No!" Jenna screamed, instinct spinning her away from the allure. With all her power, she pushed them deeper into the light. The brightness felt like a sanctuary, yet the horrifying truth was clawing at the edges of her consciousness. What if the light was just as much a trap? Then, an answer came, whispering like a summer breeze, brushing against her skin. "Face your fear, embrace it, only then will you find the truth." The figure loomed ever larger, coiling shadows slashing through the air. Its voice morphed into taunts, "You're too late. The darkness will consume you." Jenna felt the fabric of her reality begin to fray. Her heart thundered in her chest, her mind racing through the agony of each lost soul lingering in the shadows. They were reflections of what could become of her and the children lost, forgotten. "No!" she hissed fiercely, summoning the fire inside her. "I will not let them take us." "Together." Her children echoed, fear morphing into determination as they locked eyes with her. As the darkness surged for one final attempt to capture them, something inside Jenna ignited anew, her resolve clenching tight. But before she could act, the ground beneath them split open, unveiling a void filled with whispered promises and terror. What lay ahead threatened to suffocate her hope. Would Jenna truly understand the price of knowledge? Or was this the moment when despair would finally claim victory? As they raced toward the edge, Jenna grasped for the truth, but what awaited them on the other side? They fell. The abyss opened wide beneath them, swallowing their screams as they tumbled into an endless void. Time stretched, spinning them in swirling darkness, disorienting Jenna. She gripped her children tighter, desperate to shield them from the unknown. As they descended, distant whispers echoed, curling like smoke around them. "Join us, be free," the voices whispered, promises laced with despair, each plea tugging at Jenna's heart, a seduction blending hope with dread. Suddenly, momentum shifted. They crashed against the surface, but not ground. It felt like flesh, warm and pulsing beneath them. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. She looked around, the dim light revealing grotesque shapes looming in the shadows. "Mommy!" Her daughter whimpered, eyes wide with terror. "Stay close," Jenna demanded, the fierce edge of panic sharpening her tone. Shivers coursed through her body as she witnessed the nature of their surroundings. Twisting limbs reached out from the walls, each contorted figure a grotesque distortion of humanity. They moaned in unison, a mournful choir lost in the throes of agony. The ground undulated, as if alive, whispering secrets meant to drown them in despair. Jenna's grip tightened around her children, her heart pounding like a war drum. "We need to find a way out," she urged, pushing through the fear. They stumbled forward, each step bringing squelching sounds that echoed their dread, the sensation of decay clinging to their skin. "Those people," her son murmured, pointing to the shadows that moved just beyond their reach. "They look like they're trapped." The truth sunk deeper than the shadows stretching around them. They weren't just lost souls, they were the unfortunate, the abandoned, the remnants of dreams snuffed out by the dark. The terror cloaked Jenna's mind like a fog, wrapping tightly around her sanity. "Don't look at them," Jenna cried, pulling them to face the path ahead, a narrow corridor pulsating with an eerie, bioluminescent glow. "They're not real." But even as she said the words, doubt gnawed at her insides, and the memory of her own fears clawed at the edges of her mind. "Mommy!" her daughter cried, terror creeping into her voice. What if we're lost forever?" Those words hung heavily in the air, settling like lead in Jenna's chest. "We will find a way. I promise." Adrenaline surged as she forced her legs to move faster, the dim corridor leading them deeper into the unknown. But the shadows followed, snaking closer, whispering haunting truths that burrowed beneath the surface of her mind. "Embrace the darkness," they hissed, coaxing her into desolation. Every step felt heavier, every sound amplified, an endless cacophony of despair that clawed at her sanity. Then, abruptly, the corridor widened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost from view. At the center stood an altar, carved from obsidian, glistening ominously. It radiated malevolence, throbbing with a pulse Jenna could feel drumming in her chest. "Mommy, don't!" her son pleaded, but she was drawn to it, a moth to flame. The whispers intensified, swirling around her like a storm. Find the truth," as Jenna approached the altar, the air thickened, suffocating her resolve. Panic gripped her, urging her back, yet a compulsion pulled her closer. "Let me see," she breathed, reaching out. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, the chamber trembled violently. The walls rippled, and Jenna's vision splintered. Shadows clawed at her, pulling at the edges of her reality. She gasped as she glimpsed horror in the reflection, images wavered, her life collapsing into chaos. "Mommy!" her children screamed, but their voices faded, lost in a maelstrom of darkness. What had she done? The altar pulsed violently now, resonating with every heartbeat. Jenna's mind raced, crumbling under the weight of hidden truths. The whispers crescendoed into a howl, echoing her very essence. Face your fear, embrace it. As her world twisted and contorted, she felt the grip of the shadows tightening around her, merging with the night. This was the moment. Would she unravel or rise? Jenna's heart thudded violently, desperation and defiance battling within. The darkness surged, wrapping around her like a shroud, whispering promises that beckoned. Would she forsake everything to understand the terrible price of truth? She had to decide before the dark claimed her, mind, body, and soul. But just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, a familiar face twisted by sorrow. Jenna, don't let them take you. What was that voice? Could it hold the answer? As darkness tightened, Jenna knew she had to act, but in a world where fear was birthright, would she have the strength to confront what lay in wait? The darkness pulsated around Jenna like a living thing, surging forward, clawing at her mind. Her children trembled beside her, their eyes wide with a fear that threatened to swallow them whole. The altar loomed ominously, its dark surface shimmering with promises and horrors, beckoning her with a siren's call. She could feel the weight of her choices, each decision shackling her soul tighter to the shadows at play. Mommy, her daughter's tiny voice wavered, digging into Jenna's heart like a dagger. I'm scared. Jenna spun to face them, channeling all of her strength into a comforting smile. I know, sweetie, but we need to be brave. We can't let them win. Every stifling breath felt like a battle, pulling her deeper into despair. The shadows shifted, their whispers growing louder, mocking her every step. You're too weak, Jenna. You'll never escape, they chanted, a sickly reminder of her own insecurities. Together, she urged, clutching her children's hands, feeling their warmth imbuing her with faint flickers of hope. Trust me. Her voice resonated with a strength she didn't truly feel. Yet their desperation bolstered her, anchoring her resolve. They had come this far, she wasn't about to let the darkness claim them. With a deep, shuddering breath, Jenna turned back toward the altar. She reached out, fingers trembling over its surface, the cool obsidian pulsing beneath her touch. Visions flickered, a collage of memories, her life twisted by pain, darkness threatening to engulf every cherished moment. No! She shrieked, ripping her hand back as the visions clawed at her resolve. You won't take us. Waves of energy surged at her defiance, a recoil that sent the shadows snarling. Mom, what if we can't go back? Her son echoed, eyes darting nervously between Jenna and the altar. We can't let fear guide us. Jenna barked. Fear is what brought us here in the first place. She felt the shadow's grip waver, but in that moment of defiance, the light above dimmed, casting long, curling fingers that wrapped around her family in an icy embrace. Together, they stood before the altar, the air thick with tension. This is it. Our moment to choose, Jenna declared, feeling the weight of those words resonating in her heart. She glanced at her children, their faces luminous with carved innocence, and knew she had to stand firm. The whispers intensified, swirling madness encircling them, but Jenna pushed forward, unfazed. We choose to fight. Suddenly, the altar echoed her resolve, the obsidian surface shimmering before fading into a brilliant light, sharp and blinding against the daunting dark. No longer mere shadows, figures coalesced into familiar faces, friends and neighbors Jenna had come to know, now twisted by darkness and despair. Join us, Jenna, you belong here. They moaned, their plaintive voices pulling at her heartstrings. We simply want to save you. No. Jenna cried out, filled with newfound conviction. I choose love. I choose my family. I will not let this darkness take us. In that moment of defiance, the altar trembled, light bursting forth with an untamed ferocity. The surrounding shadows recoiled, screeching as if burned by the purity of her conviction. Run! She yelled, yanking her children to her side. The world around them erupted into chaos. The shadows screeched in fury, twisting back, creating creatures of torment, but Jenna stood firm. The light pushed against the encroaching darkness, a battle unlike any other. As Jenna thrust her body between her children and the oncoming dread, she felt a strength swell from deep within her, a burning fire igniting her spirit. Together, she shouted, the mantra driving them forward, and they ran toward the blinding light, every heartbeat echoing her terror yet echoing a fierce love. The dark figures shrieked, recoiling from the light. "You'll pay for this, Jenna." They cursed, their forms splintering like glass. With one final surge, Jenna leaped into the radiance, her children pressed tightly against her. As they broke through the threshold, an overwhelming warmth enveloped them, wrapping around their frightened bodies like a comforting embrace. Then came silence and light. Jenna opened her eyes slowly, breathless, her heart racing not from fear but from an overwhelming sense of relief. They found themselves in their living room, the familiar coziness wrapping around them like a blanket. The sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the room with an ethereal glow. "Mommy?" her son whispered, voice trembling. "Are we safe now?" Tears stung Jenna's eyes as she pulled her children close, hugging them tightly to her chest. "Yes, baby. We're home." The shadows were gone, the weight of despair lifted from her shoulders. Yet her heart still thudded from the memory of their encounter, not forgotten, merely transformed. As she stroked her children's hair, a newfound strength settled in her chest. They had faced the darkness and one not just escaped, but confronted the fear that loomed in the corners of her mind. "Mom!" her daughter exclaimed, peering out the window. "Look!" Jenna turned to see their neighbors outside, some wearing ridiculous Halloween costumes, their laughter ringing out harmoniously like a sweet melody. "See?" Jenna smiled softly, holding her children a bit tighter. "Life goes on." Now, they could embrace all the light and love the world had to offer. This moment felt like a beginning, a chance to build anew, embracing not just the joy of Halloween but the very essence of living fully together, without fear. Jenna breathed deeply, releasing the remnants of the past, letting the warmth of hope flutter in her chest. They would write new memories now, untainted by the shadows of yesterday. And so, as laughter filled the air, Jenna stepped forward with her children, ready to face whatever came next together. Now, to my amazing audience, if you felt the rush of emotions, if this story gripped you like it did me, then you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm and keep these tales alive. Flood the comments section with your reactions, your theories. I want to hear every single thought. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need this conclusion in their lives. Let us spread the magic of storytelling together.